we're going to cover the topic of how much it costs to launch a clothing brand, or actually any product-based business this could be relevant to, that is made in the UK. So I'm going to run you through some of the typical costs that we see it costing our clients and Make It British members to launch their brands. And then also I'm going to give you some advice on how to cut down those costs and spend a lot less. If you've got a question, please pop it in the comments and let me know. Let me know you're here. I'd love to see who's watching. And thanks once again for joining. So let's go. So how much do you think it costs to start a clothing brand that is made in the UK? Let me know in the comments how much you think it might cost, or how much it cost you when you launched your brand. It could be a lot more than you actually think. So can you launch a brand with £500? Is that possible? As you may have heard, famously, the Cambridge Satchel company, Julie Dean, launched the brand with just £500 with her first investment of stock. Is that possible? Or do you need more like 50,000? Are there some brands that spend a lot more? We surveyed our Make It British members to find out how much they spent on launching their businesses. And the results of that may actually surprise you. So, on average, you can see here, only 7% of our members spent less than £1,000 on launching their business. And that was to get it to the point where the products were on sale. It didn't include further costs after that, after they'd launched their business. That was just to get to their launch point. The average amount that people spent was between 15 and 50,000. And some people, 7% spent over 50,000, which is a phenomenal amount of money. Now, those costs can be vastly reduced. So I want to give you some tips today for, firstly, what those costs might include. There may be some things in here that you'd not thought of, and how you can cut those costs down. Where the areas are that I see people spending too much money when they could really be saving their hard-earned cash to make sure that once they've launched their product, it's actually really successful, because they've got some money after they've launched to actually continue marketing and selling their business. So, how do you think these costs break down? Let's have a look at those one by one, and let's make sure that you don't overspend. The first thing you're going to need to spend money on when you're launching a new clothing line or any sort of business where you've got a product is going to be prototyping. So there's going to be costs involved in getting those first samples made. That will include things like research and development. Before you've even started getting a prototype made, you need to do your research. You're then going to need to spend costs on raw materials and the components that go into that product. You'll also have manufacturing costs associated with producing a prototype or a sample. And you're going to have design costs in there as well. That may be you designing, that may be you have to pay someone else to do some designs for you. Secondly, you've got the cost of the actual stock. So once you've got your prototypes made, you've then got to buy the stock that you're going to commit to, that you're actually going to sell when you first launch. So that will include also your materials and trims and the manufacturing costs of getting that first order made. And I've got some tips about how you can get that cost down when we come to it later on. Then you've got the cost of the logistics. So that's just the logistics of moving around your raw materials and your components and your finished stock. It may be that you're buying some of your raw materials and components from overseas, so you've got to factor in all the costs that will be involved in bringing those raw materials in. Then you're going to have packaging and labels and all those things that you're going to want to put on your product before you ship it out to the customer. So that's a cost that you're going to have to pay up for in advance as well. Then you've got marketing. So the cost of actually telling your potential customers about your new business and about your new products. So that includes obviously a website. So you're going to need a great website. That's going to be your base for where everyone can come to find out about your products and hopefully to then buy them. And you're going to want to get some amazing photography and video done to go on that website as well. So unless you are a photographer yourself, you're going to have to invest in the cost of good photography, because it can make your brand, can make the difference between your brand looking amazing when you first launch and from it looking unprofessional. And it can make a big difference. Then you might have the cost of any brand ambassador or influencers that you want to pay to tap into their audience to talk about your products and get your products out there. And that can be quite a substantial cost, but can really pay dividends. So it might be something you're going to want to save money for. Then you've got any trade shows or events that you're going to want to do when you launch your business to get the word out there about your product and get your product in front of as many people as you possibly can. Now, if those trade shows are overseas, you're going to have a considerable investment of actually getting to those shows as well. So you need to factor in the cost of such events. And you might also want to pay someone to do PR. You need to think about how you're going to get people to talk about your brand. How are you going to get your brand featured in the press? Are you going to do that yourself, or will you have to pay someone else to do that for you? So all those things can come into the cost of marketing your business. Social media can be an amazing way, an amazing free way of promoting your business, but it takes time. And you may, in addition to that, also want to spend some money on doing paid marketing and advertising as well. Then you've got the really boring part of business, which is the fees and admin costs that you may incur from people like legal advice. So if you want to do NDAs or have some sort of legal contracts with people that you're working with, you may have to pay a lawyer to do something like that. And that doesn't come cheap. The same with accountancy and bookkeeping fees. Is that something you're going to do yourself? Or is that something that you're going to pay someone else to do? This is where the costs can really start to ramp up. And boring things like insurance. As a business, you have to have it at the bare minimum. You need to be covering for product liability. So you need to make sure you've covered yourself and you've got some insurance in place for that. And then what if you want a studio space to work from? Maybe you're making the products yourself and you can't make them from home. You need to have another space. You may even have staffing costs involved in that, with people helping you to ship the products out. So that all comes into your fees and admin costs. So how can you keep these costs down? You've seen all of the costs that can potentially be involved. What are my tips for how you can keep your costs down? Number one is to make sure you do your research first. Now, if you didn't see the video that I did a couple of weeks ago on how to find a UK manufacturer, there was tips in there on what you need to prepare before you reach out to a manufacturer to get product prototypes made. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is jumping to that sample stage far too soon. They get overexcited. They start developing prototypes before they've properly done their research and got everything together in the right way, that they then end up otherwise just making endless samples, and samples cost money. So the prototyping stage is one of the stages that I see people spending the most money when they start up, and you can considerably cut those costs down by doing your research first. Number two is don't buy too much stock. Please, for the love of God, do not buy too much stock when you first launch your business. Buying too much stock can be easily done. You might find a manufacturer that you like, but their minimum order quantities are higher than you'd hope to actually spend. But the problem with that, however much you like that manufacturer, if they're pushing you to buy 300 units, that's a huge amount of money that you've got to outlay right at the beginning in stock for your new business without knowing who's actually going to buy your product once it hits the shelves, once it goes live on your website. So if you possibly can, negotiate minimum order quantities with not just your manufacturer, but also your fabric suppliers and your trims and components and your packaging. Just negotiate those minimum order quantities down if you can, or find a different manufacturer or supplier to work with. There's plenty of manufacturers in the UK that can make small order quantities. Make It British, we know tons of those sorts of manufacturers and we can help you to find them as well. So don't go with the first manufacturer you find that gives you a big minimum order quantity. And don't be tempted to go overseas to get your products made, because you'll certainly have to place a larger order when you go overseas. So to keep that initial quantity down, to keep those initial stock costs right down when you first launch. Number 3 is shop around for services. God, how many people have I seen being totally ripped off by agency this and agency that? In fact, anything with the word agency in it is going to cost you double what it might cost you if you went to an individual. Now, I'm not saying don't work with an agency, but just make sure you've done your due diligence. When it comes to your website, how much of it can you do yourself? How much of it can you get done by an individual or a freelancer? Rather than going to an agency who tries to sell you an entire package and they're going to do everything for you for launching your website, your social media, your branding, your hosting. Next thing you know, you're committed to a retainer with them that could potentially cost you thousands of pounds. And that is also one of the big mistakes I've seen people make. So try and go work with individuals if you possibly can, and avoid getting signed in to big retainers and contracts with people before you know exactly what it is they're going to deliver and whether that is going to deliver any results for your business as well. The same goes for things like lawyers and professional fees and bookkeepers and accountants. There are a lot of people out there that will charge businesses, particularly small businesses, a lot of money. But at the same time, there are a lot of services that you can now find yourself online without having to pay big agencies and professionals to produce those contracts for you. So for instance, if you're looking for an NDA, there are several websites that you can find online where you can get standard contracts that you can just amend that give you a basic NDA that you can give to a manufacturer without getting a lawyer to draw you up one at the cost of thousands, because generally an NDA is pretty standard whichever manufacturer you give it to. So just be a little bit savvy when it comes to the professional fees and shop around first. Number 3, don't spend a fortune on legal fees. I've already covered that one, haven't I? So we can skip on. Save on legal fees. Yes, exactly. I've covered that within shop around for services. And then finally, just do what you can yourself. So there's going to be some things that you will need to outsource, but there are other things that you probably have the skills to do yourself, or you can learn those skills to do yourself. So do you need to work with a production consultant to manage all your manufacturing for you and then be forever paying them a commission to manage your manufacturing for you? Or can you manage the production yourself by going directly to the factory yourself, learning those skills, and we can certainly teach you that at Make It British, on how to work directly with manufacturers rather than going through a third party, because then you don't necessarily own the relationship with that factory. Other things that you might want to think about doing for yourself are things like parts of your website, your social media, writing your own press releases. So if you're a good writer, maybe you can write the copy for your website. If you're a photographer, you can obviously take your own photographs, or maybe you can outsource the photography for your website to a very good photography student who's keen to get work in their portfolio rather than a professional company or a professional photographer who's going to charge you thousands. Sorry to all those professional photographers out there who I've just dissed your services, because they are brilliant. But there are some things that you can definitely save on, and photography may be one of them. So I hope that's helped. So before we finish, I just want to give you, here you go, a handy diagram that gives you an aid memoir of all those things you might want to think about that go into the launch costs of launching your business. And if you get in touch with me at kate@makeitbritish.co.uk, I can send you a copy of this as well. You can use it as your screensaver. How does that sound? So does anyone have any questions about launching a product that's made in the UK, or the cost of launching a product that's made in the UK? Let me know in the comments. How did you find that information? Was that useful? I'm going to be going live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Sometimes I will have guests on the show. Other times it will just be me answering your questions and giving you tips and advice for making a product that is made in the UK. So please do make sure you tune in live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. here on YouTube. And don't forget as well to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And press the little bell. If you subscribe and then switch on notifications, you will also get a notification flash up when we go live, and you can hear all of my tips that I have about how to make a product that is made in the UK. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me today, and I will see you next week at 1 p.m. Bye.